All right, so thank you all for joining us tonight. Again, I wanted to make sure everybody knows our UTL team, who you maybe know at this point, but just in case, we have Taskina Tari, Elizabeth Vanderel, and Andrea Bena. I hope I said your last name right, Andrea. I apologize if I didn't. So they're gonna help walk us through some of the scenarios, and then we'll get into the other parts as well. There's a lot of content. There's actually nice images tonight and a bit of, but there's also a lot of content here. For those of you who haven't been able to join us on the other topics, we are very lucky to have had so much feedback from all of you. But at this point, we have a ton of content and a lot of it is written word. And so these aren't the most enthralling meetings, but it's really important that we go through these and that we get your ideas and feedback. But we will go kind of quickly unless you interrupt. So if I'm going too fast, please let me know because I do tend to do that as well. So let me find the right mouse and I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. All right. All right, can you all see this? East Hollis Street. So this is under goal 2.1, redevelopment opportunity. And this is looking at the East Hollis Street area as a cohesive and vibrant mixed-use district anchored by the development of the potential commuter rail station at 25 Crown Street. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, but I'm just going to forewarn you that these beautiful drawings are not all oriented north. For those of you who are like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. If you just look for the markers that you know, they're really nice layouts of the possibility we can do.
Sarah, actually, I think I'll take over and then Andrea will chime in. Hi, everyone. So I think I'll just start by taking us just one step back, just as Sarah said, that this falls under a larger goal, one of our top goals, which is promoting development that is mixed use, multimodal, and sustainable. And it also falls under one of our other goals, which is ensuring access to a range of transportation options, connecting various parts of the city, and making sure we're meeting the needs of different individuals and groups. So East Hollis, being the sort of eastern gateway into the city, it's also a prime location where one of our major recommendations are taking place, which is to plan proactively around future commuter rail stations. And of course, the master plan is just like a great opportunity to really envision the future of these areas. The city might not have full control over what will happen, but this is like the opportunity we get to vision and create that guide for the future, right? So in terms of recommendations under East Hollis and actively planning around the rail station, yes, thanks, Sarah. If we look at the plan and the lower left is the location for the train station. So if you go to the website, you can actually hover over these little buttons and they'll give you little captions. But we really want to think about sort of future housing and commercial development around these areas. So really transit-oriented development. Right now, Nashua might be still heavily dedicated and oriented to cars, but the city already is showing increased efforts and increased interest in thinking about how we start to accommodate and balance other uses, including safe and welcoming environments for pedestrians, bikes, and other alternative modes of transportation. That also includes the bus service. So the commuter rail station can actually become this sort of hub where all these modes can meet, and we can also sort of prioritize last mile connections throughout the city. So we really have to think about sort of creating the right kind of infrastructure for these areas for future use, including, like I said, bike and pedestrian access to meet the projected needs, and then also develop solutions for parking, and then think about how how everyone sort of comes into these stations and then navigates throughout the various areas. And East Hollis is a great area for this because it's already a mixed use area. And the goal for the master plan is really to make it a little more cohesive, think about connecting existing uses with future development. So a part of this would be thinking through a new street network that anticipates future development in priority parcels. Thinking about different street improvements. This is already happening further up north. Thinking about how to connect future rail trails. So that's that thick blue line that you're seeing coming from the train station. Thinking about creating continuous street walls. When you think of a mixed-use district, you want to think about active, vibrant street networks. So the dark red you're seeing are actual active commercial uses at the bottom of buildings, and how sort of someone can traverse those and have activity while biking and also walking. Am I missing anything, Andrea?
I think you got most of it, and all of this would be complemented with improving the streetscape in general. So making sure there are crosswalks to really ensure a walkable neighborhood and opportunity.
Things we've just been allowing everyone to just have a conversation with us as we speak. So feel free to ask a question as we go. We don't have to wait till the end.
So this is Jay jumping in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Pete Schaefer. I just have a question. You know they're going to be doing something near the bridge at some point. Is this part of this connecting with the bridge, or is this separate?
So the bridge is a little further up, right, Sarah?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about 3 streets up.
So that is, go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, so Pete, the integration of especially the bike and pedestrian improvements that are going with the bridge, you can see the bridge is a little bit off here, but all those improvements are part of this integrated area to meld what we're doing as far down as South Street, right? So integrate these improvements down to the rest of the neighborhood, yes.
I have a question. I asked the same question at one of the previous meetings about the Amherst Street development. How, you talk about improving pedestrian access, how are you going to be providing for crossing major boulevards for pedestrians? Are there just going to be a lot of crosswalks, or are there going to be other ways to get across?
So actually, I'd like to toss this to Julie, because Julie's done a lot of work with some crosswalks, and we have some new grants about crosswalks that we're doing. And then after Sally, I want to go back to Jay, because he did raise his hand.
Sorry.
That's
Sure.
okay.
We explore all sorts of types of improvements to our crosswalks through actually there's a list of countermeasures that we get a grant to implement, including things like high visibility crosswalks. So either different types of paint or striping methods to really make them pop. We use rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RRFBs. You'll see that on the Main Street Bridge. We use those when we have high volumes of traffic, especially at speeds that are likely over the posted speed limit. We'll do just enhanced lighting just to make sure the intersections are well lit. So there are a series that we look at and customize for each location based on, the site distance and the amount of traffic.
Question about the train station?
Oh, I think we were going to go to Jay first, Gene, because he's had his hand up. So can we go to Jay and then we'll come back to you?
Okay.
Thank you. Jay?
Sorry if I'm interjecting. I think as many people know, CSX is applied to purchase the Pan Am right-of-way. And word on the street is at least that if they're successful, they intend to abandon the little used Hillsborough branch, which is that rail line that kind of runs northwesterly from the Crown Street site. There is an active group called Friends of the Sahigan Valley Rail Trail that would really love to see that converted to a rail trail, or if that failing, a rail with trail. If that were to happen, it would be a tremendous opportunity. It would actually connect. It would be the opportunity to have a bicycle pedestrian trail connecting the Crown Street site all the way through Nashua out to the Merrimack border, and then beyond, through Amherst, Milford to the town of Wilton. So I wonder if that's just something we might want to at least consider referencing as a future possibility, and maybe perhaps depicting with a dashed line, if that's appropriate.
That's great. And thank you for letting us know because we were really curious about that.
Jean? Jean, did you want to ask your question?
Well, probably a question for Jay. Thinking about a train station and crosswalks and parking areas, I would think that we need to have some kind of an idea about how many trains a day we're talking. Are we talking about 6 trains a day or 20 trains a day? And that might suggest that we at least consider a parking garage and an overpass, if necessary, to handle a major commuter rail connection to Nashua. But I have no feel for what Jay and his transit experts are envisioning with this thing. The second comment is, I think Jay mentioned either a rail trail or rail with trail out the northwest branch line, which is so seldom used that I would hope that this master plan would at least consider decommissioning that line in favor of truck service for those people that need freight out there and convert that to a rail trail. But the major question is how many trains are we likely to have a day? Because that's got big implications for crosswalks and gates and all of that.
Thank you, Jean.
So,
I think, oh, go ahead, Jay, please.
Did you want me to jump in on that?
Yes.
So right now, this is still somewhat, of course, in flux. Initially, the plans were for over 30 trips a day to Nashua. So that's a very high level of service, similar to what you're seeing happening in Lowell. North of the Nashua station, the plan was 16 round trips a day to Manchester. So it drops off pretty considerably after the Crown Street station.
Yeah.
So the plan at this point is that the station itself would be an island. Again, very similar to what you see with Lowell, with a pedestrian overpass. So it is in flux because right now the ridership figures are being reviewed and MBTA has been making changes to their commuter rail service. So there's going to obviously have to be coordination with the MBTA. So, but the plan is for a very high level of service.
Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, hi. I actually, I'm happy to hear that level of service to Nashua. I find it hard to believe, but we'll see. And I'm still studying it. So, but I don't think an overpass would be a good idea. I'm actually opposed to it. I think you want to have people crossing at the street, and obviously the parking demand is to be determined. That you're gonna for myself where I live, the time to get to and from that station would be a part of the consideration. And anybody trying, I live locally, but anybody coming from the highway, it is not a convenient connection. Of course, then you have another proposal to put a station down at Spitbrook. So I'm very hopeful. We worked on a TOD study for up in Manchester where the service would end, and people are very optimistic, but we'll see. I didn't really have much else to add here. I think this is great. I really like it. The one thing that I am sort of, when you get to the bottom of the map in existing conditions, I don't know what your thoughts were, but the existing conditions, the whole street network really falls apart. And it's pretty, down by Harvard and to the south. And I don't know what your thoughts were for, I don't really know. I just recall, I don't know this that well, but I just recall it's pretty wide open. So I don't know whether what you're showing here on this plan is changing anything, or is this just trying to emphasize putting in sidewalks everywhere? That's like the only question I have.
I think the plan is first centered around the area right next to the train station. To just really think about what that would mean in terms of access and coming in and out, as well as parking and nearby development. And then I think you're correct. There is no current sort of bike networks that are in place right now in that area. So it's really first just improving sidewalk and tree canopies, and then thinking further about how we can start to think about extending bike networks.
Great.
And in the current plan, there is one change we're making, which is the extension of Mill Street to allow for that drop off in front of the potential commuter station. But then one of the recommendations was also thinking more generally in the future of reimagining the street network and making it a bit more walkable.
Cool.
I would like to make a comment if I could. That train station, the spot for that train station right now is right next to a hill. Okay, so one of the things in theory you could do is you could have something that's got an elevator in it, and you can actually have people go up to street level up on top of the hill. And in fact, you're very close to that Dr. Crisp school. If you had the bus come in here to pick people up, you could come out. There's a bus route already along was it Arlington Street. So there might be something you could work out. That's that's also another way of getting people around without having them trying to get up that hill and all that stuff. I think, but you have to be careful because that's a residential area. But I think there are some possibilities if we think about it. The other quick comment I have is that just recently, I think last year or the year before, Nashua redid the sidewalks on the south side of East Hollis, and they actually did a pretty good job of it. Okay, of course, eventually there's going to be a path on the other side. I keep hearing about it, but I think there are going to be a number of avenues that may not be vehicle related, but could be bike and walking related. Okay.
Thanks, Pete. How about John?
Yeah, I just along the same lines of what Steve and Bill just talked about, having operated buses in this area, the circulation of the surface roads for the buses is a real challenge, and the traffic situation on the main corridor headed to Hudson, which is kind of the primary way to get a bus over to Crown Street, creates a lot of challenges during the course of a day at peak times. So I think that push to look at the circulation and to make some improvements to the circulation of that surface road kind of layout would be key to being successful, to get a bus there 16 times a day, and to have a schedule that's consistent enough to make using the bus attractive.
Thank you. I saw another hand, but is it gone now?
Sally.
Sally.
Hi. So actually what John said kind of spoke to my question, that when you called this a transportation hub, I was wondering if you were going to actually make the center of the bus routes come from here. And what John said just indicated to me that probably not, that the bus routes will still originate from the bus station downtown and just will touch on this spot.
So we do plan for that as rail, the timeline gets closer and it is, I guess, more certified, that the traditional hub and spoke system of our bus system is very old school. And we plan to modernize that. And it will not just be every route goes out from the center and goes back to the center and then you change. And so as rail comes online, we see that as a really important pivot point for our system to modernize and to look at it through a different lens. And so that is in the plans at that point. So no, we will absolutely still have a downtown pivot point, but also out here, and it should be a more modern system than the hub and spoke that we have today.
And will our bus system begin to include weekends, Saturdays and Sundays as well?
It always includes Saturdays from 6 a.m. to 11. We do not run on Sundays at this time.
I know, and I'm asking if the plans include expanding to include Sunday as well.
If you guys think that's important, then that helps to get us there. Yes.
Yes, I do. There you go.
Thank you.
I agree too. I think Sundays are important.
Thank you, Caroline. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to scroll down here. I think you've all had the website. You all have the chance to go to look at their recommendations and the actions. And I think that the UTL team went through this really well. So I'm going to go back up to the top. Come on. And let's see, next is Amherst Street Corridor, which we did talk about at a whole meeting on April 6th. And so we made some revisions based on the information there, and I will turn it over to somebody to give a quick summary of the Amherst Street Corridor.
Sure. I might repeat myself a little, and I think we've talked a lot about Amherst Corridor in our public meetings, so please be patient with me. I think I'll also talk about Amherst Corridor in relation to sort of Daniel Webster Highway together, because these are both two of the most heavily used roadways in the city. So again, the master plan sort of gives us the opportunity to re-envision the future of these corridors and meet our sort of overarching goals that I mentioned before, creating a connected network through sustainable development. And for both these corridors, Amherst and Daniel Webster Highway, I think the idea is really to look ahead and create visions that are transformative in nature. And like we have to think creatively about how Nashua as a city will be prepared to accommodate and balance different uses of the road and create more safe and welcoming environments. So for both the Amherst corridor and Daniel Webster Highway, the master plan is creating this vision and providing these goals. But for both of them need to be studied separately on their own through corridor plans following the master plan, of course, because we need to critically think about when and how we can begin to implement some of these ideas that we're showing, and also who gets involved in these processes. So I'm sure people will have many questions about that in general. So for Amherst Street Corridor, we began by looking at it as through a sort of traffic lens, thinking about how this is sort of heavily used corridor and how we can make it sort of more balanced, a more balanced corridor. And then that gave us the opportunity to also think about beautifying the corridor and creating a destination for the corridor. So it's a very auto-oriented corridor, as we all know, but for this vision to take place, of course, we need to think about where and when it should take place in. So right now, this image, I know we've mentioned this in previous public meetings, is just a sampling of Amherst Corridor. So it's not any particular location. But the general ideas are that we turn the corridor into a more mobility-oriented corridor, a corridor that can balance car uses, bicycle, pedestrians. There are nearby residential areas that already exist, and there's anticipated residential development that will take place. So how to think about how people get from those areas and come to Amherst Corridor to frequent businesses. So Amherst Corridor is also a part of a sort of larger goal for the city in terms of densification, to think about future sustainable development in the city, future mixed use in the city, and it's a prime location for that to happen. So the image we're showing here is showing that sampling of what mixed-use development could look like along Amherst Corridor, the red being commercial and the yellow being sort of residential on top. We're also showing two-way bike lanes on either side and the idea of a carriageway. So we spoke about this in the public meeting, and some of the feedback we got is, does this make sense throughout the corridor? And of course, no, it should take place where right now there is space for it and where activity currently exists for the corridor for the carriageway to make sense with existing businesses. And of course, where ample space is right now. And that right now, if we had to look at a map, is more sort of the center portion of Amherst Street Corridor. And so not the closest to the exit, because that's already developed and with buildings already very close to the street. The carriageway provides a system to not only sort of calm traffic, but also create this sort of public environment where the buildings are closer to the street. People can park off and go to a cafe or a shop or do their business, get back on their car and get back on Amherst Street Corridor. So other feedback we got for the corridor was to, again, think about how do people cross the corridor. So think about high visibility crosswalks, How do we incorporate bus stops and along the corridor, thinking about how often should we have curb cuts, especially if there's going to be bikers on the road, how to create the biking environment, making it a little more safer, close to sort of fast traffic. And I think, yeah, those are a lot of the comments that we got back, and those are all things that we want to think about as we go through the recommendations.
Thank you. Bill?
Hi, so I'm a transportation planner for those people who don't know, and I know several people on the call. So I love this idea of Amherst Street. I live in near exit 7 and I use Amherst Street, and it's just, it's wonderful. A little bit of this image on the top kind of reminds me of Chestnut Hill and Route 9, where the development of the street. So, but of course they don't have the bike accommodation. So two things. One is that I would change high-speed transit, the wording of that, because to me, that's I'm thinking buses, BRT, I don't know what, bus rapid transit. It's just the wording is potentially not the right wording. I think what you mean is that's where the vehicles are moving more quickly, but it's not really transit. And in fact, when you were describing, you didn't even really mention buses. So, but if you're envisioning having bus rapid transit in this corridor, you know, wonderful, but probably not economically, you know, supported in terms of the market. One of the questions I have looking at this is how much of this would be sort of the public right of way and how much of it would come from private development, because I'm looking at 6 travel lanes plus planted filters plus the bike path before you even get to what looks like the parking lot. And that seems like a very, very large right of way. So I don't know if you've taken a cross section to figure it out, but I'd love to know whether, you know, what you're imagining you could fit in within what is actually the current right of way versus what would be part of a, you know, working with developers to build it out.
Sarah, if you scroll down, I think, Andrea, you can speak a little to the
in this diagram, we were exploring that same question, Bill. And obviously this varies. This is, as Sahigan was saying, a prototypical section, but there would be some extension of the right-of-way needed to accommodate the carriageway and the diagonal parking. And there would be some negotiation with landowners to allow for this to happen. And the importance to really help them understand that this new carriageway and the convenient parking right in front of it and the improved sidewalks and the potential plazas on those little parts of the sidewalk that extend will bring more commercial traffic and more customers.
Thank you. Amber?
My question was just on we have the limit of 4 stories, like we're changing it so that we can have now up to 4 stories. Is the height of 4 stories the maximum that we could do because of the airport, or could we possibly have 5 or 6 stories?
That's a great question. Do you want me to try that, or?
So we put 4 stories just as sort of the viable development that would make sense to attract developers. So that's the minimum that we put.
Okay, got it. Perfect. I read it as the maximum was 4 stories. And it didn't make sense with the, 4 stories being the minimal viable for developers. So that makes sense. Thank you.
And of course, from
areas that can be more than 4 stories, just so you know, it's closer back to the railroad tracks and the airport in the back has to be shorter. And as you get closer to Amherst Street, it can actually be taller.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
And I think it's also about sort of what kind of character the city would like to take in terms of what Amherst corridor represents.
How it feels as you drive down it, yeah.
I have another comment. Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, thank you. So as someone just asked, what are the thoughts and plans for how we would accommodate, bus stops along this corridor. This is both DW and Amherst are really high risk places for pedestrians and buses. We end up with a lot of rear end accidents along this corridor because the rate of travel is fairly high. And by the time the driver is able to identify that there's a passenger at the stop, there's not a lot of time for the vehicles behind the bus to recognize that we're going to be performing a stop. They're also traveling at a high rate of speed. And it'd be great to get a little bit more protection by, by expanding a shoulder and making a place for the bus to use to make a stop. There's a lot of places along Amherst where we are really just stopping in a high speed lane.
I would think you'd want to try, if you could, to incorporate stops into some of these developments. And I know it sometimes slows things down, but it would make for much better, sort of like what you do at Market Basket right now. So, but one other comment I wanted to make, I don't know if someone wants to respond to the specific on the bus stops, and I made this in writing, and this applies to really anything where you're looking to do transformative development, and this may have come up in another meeting, is just what needs to change in terms of the planning process in the city to, support this kind of transformation. Because I feel like you have an existing process that may not actually work for this kind of development and review. Even if you design, you get it a sort of a conceptually approved, there may be a lot more capacity needed and just maybe even a different process to make things happen.
I would just speak to the idea of going into these developments because of the layout of Amherst Street and how isolated it is from the rest of the city. Any sort of trip up and down Amherst Street, extending all the way to Walmart from downtown, basically takes an hour round trip now. And that's with only stops in 2 plazas. So if we were to extend and go into more plazas, then the route gets to be so long that it's no longer convenient enough for anyone to use.
That's a great point. Thank you, John.
Okay, I have a comment on this.
Okay, one sec. Oh, go ahead, Caroline. Go ahead. Yep.
Are you sure?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so when I was in Los Angeles, there was one busy street called Wilshire, and one of the lanes in the street was a bus-only lane, so only the buses could go through there. And perhaps that would be better. One is because it would encourage people to take the bus, and 2 is you would have fewer of these issues where the bus would have to go into, say, Market Basket or Walmart in order to pick up people and just slow down the route. This way the bus just has its own lane, goes forward, and it's safer for pedestrians too because they don't have to fear the cars.
Thank you, Caroline. Jay?
So I hear John's point. I think that the most critical safety issue for bicycles, for pedestrians, and for motor vehicles is speed. Anybody who's driving Amherst Street understands how high the speeds can be. They're also high in the right lane. People pass in the right lane. So of all of the improvements that we can make, and I love some of these concepts, I think the most critical is lowering the design speed and narrowing lanes and getting the actual speed far closer to the posted speed would go a long way to addressing really all the safety issues.
Thank you.
I think that it's unfortunate that there's not an alternative for commuters who are really just using Amherst Street as a conveyance from Hudson across towards Milford, or as a way to get over to 101. The fact of the matter is that there's always going to be traffic there regardless of the calming that you do, and it's unfortunate there's not a better alternative for them.
Yes, thank you, John. So the dichotomy of the through commuters who are trying to get to Route 3 or away from Route 3 versus the people who are trying to use it as the retail corridor that it is, and their homes as well.
Yep.
All right, I think, Jay, your hand, I'm going to put it down. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I'll fix it.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you. I think this was a really good discussion about being more clear about bus facilities as far as this goes. And Bill asked a really good question that I don't necessarily have an answer for. about how the planning process exactly needs to change. And he is 100% right, it has to change. But I think it's a combination of working with DOT. It's a combination of city processes. And I think it's also setting kind of expectations. There's been talk for, Julie can correct me, 30 years of the expansion of Route 101 to allow for more lanes. And I think we'd like to change the conversation away from just more lanes and to accommodate more modes. But exactly how we're going to do that, I don't have a clear answer for it this time.
Yeah, and I would just add those original plans were designed when we had forecasted traffic volumes that were not realized. What we thought we would have by this time, 20 years out is not. It didn't happen. The traffic didn't grow. So, we're in the process of a project with DOT where they're going to, be looking at this and designing it. And I'm not exactly convinced that what we forecasted in our corridor plan that's now like 15 years old or something like that is what they're going to do. So they'll be taking a new look at it. They'll be going back out for public input. It's going to be really important, in my opinion, that all of us who want to see this transformation go out and speak to it when DOT asks what we think. Tell them, please. And having our master plan reflect these desires is really important in that public process as well.
Julia, what is the best way to reach the DOT? Would it be to write them a letter or to go to one of their meetings?
Both. I would, we don't have a public comment period open for that project right now. They are so early in it. But I actually reached out to the project manager earlier last week to see what we need to do to get this ball rolling again. This project has been delayed several times. And in fact, that's probably a good thing at this point because we don't have a wide swath of pavement with really fast moving traffic. So we'll just make sure that we're diligent about getting the word out when the public comment period opens. We've got a wonderful contact list at this point. There is, I will send you the link to the project, specific information on DOT's website that does give you the project manager's name and contact information. So I'll put that in the chat pod.
Thank you, Julia.
I do wonder though, if at some point the city needs to do a study to see where the cars are coming from and where they're going. Because it seems to me, I find it hard to believe that people would drive from 93 across the bridge here and up to Amherst Street, but I think they do that. But I don't know. I mean, you don't know, do these cars come in here and stay in Nashua to go to work, or do they just pass through, or do we have any idea what's going on there?
It would be good to do a survey on that for sure, Peter.
We do have a good idea of some of that. It's not comprehensive at this point, but we do know how many people from Nashua commute south to the Boston area, how many people in Nashua work in Nashua, and we do have a really good idea of our region, how many commute down Route 3 and therefore are all funneling down 101 and over to Route 3 to go down. So all of that is in the existing conditions report that is on this website already.
And this is Jay jumping in on that. We also have a pretty detailed regional traffic model that shows that. I will just say, obviously, we've all gone through a pretty dramatic year of change, and traffic patterns are changing and commuter patterns are changing also. And although who knows if it's enduring, but we are seeing an increase in off-peak traffic and weekend traffic, which is interesting. And we have seen a reduction in commuter traffic, although again, we don't know whether that'll be sustained.
I want to say that, I did read that report, but the question is, what have we learned from it and what can we do with the result of the analysis? To me, I couldn't quite grasp all of it in terms of, okay, now what? You've got the data, but now what?
So Jay, Pete, we can also hook you up with the NRPC's website and the Technical Transportation Committee, who reviews this stuff and feeds it back up to DOT on a monthly basis. The Regional Planning Commission is our MPO, or Metropolitan Planning Organization, and they provide a really, really critical role in producing this data, keeping the data up to date, helping all of our surrounding communities and us model this, and they're the go-between between the municipality and the state in getting these things done. So that would be a great resource. I'm going to scroll on down to Daniel Webster Highway, because I do want to keep us moving. We have a whole bunch of other things we'd like to touch on tonight. So Daniel Webster Highway, and the highway is here. And this is the former Dow chemical site here. And there's actually applications before planning board right now on this half of it, which is why this one says proposed development with this access. And so I can turn over this to you, Teal, again.
Yeah, thank you for that background, Sarah. So I think in terms of Daniel Webster Highway, we know that right now the highway is sort of characterized by big box retail development and shopping malls, and we know that the future of this kind of development is less likely to change in the immediate future. But again, the master plan sort of again provides an opportunity to think about the long-term trajectory of these uses and how we can sort of create a corridor vision and plan for the Daniel Webster Highway, also from a mobility and transit perspective. So generally the goals are pretty similar to Amherst Street Corridor, really about improving the public realm environment of Daniel Webster Highway in terms of sidewalk and pedestrian and bike environment. But also, right, what the image we're showing here right now is that near Daniel Webster Highway is the other site for the future commuter rail station in Nashua. So it's another site where we have to proactively think about the surrounding area. And as Sarah mentioned, because it is a former chemical site, there's some uses which are not permitted, such as overnight uses because of contaminant runoff, including housing, hotels. So the image we're showing here right now, ideally from a sort of transit-oriented development perspective, would have included sort of increased multi-family housing around it, or some kind of hotel, just welcome people into Nashua from the south. But that's not; those uses are not currently allowed there. So what we're showing here is the train station, the north by the water, and then off of it some commercial and retail development. Ample parking. We are showing in the gray a future parking garage to accommodate likely a demand for parking. And then we're showing new connected streets that come off of the train and connect into Daniel Webster Highway and then onto nearby neighborhoods, which would, if we thought about a future public realm improvement on the highway, it will all help with last mile connections from neighborhoods to the train station. And then the thick blue line on the other side of the rail, we're showing an anticipated rail trail. We would take advantage of the water side and the sort of anticipated transit-oriented development and make this an area of recreation as well. Andrea, please feel free to add if I'm missing anything.
I just wanted to add in relation to the rail trail. We also have the bridge that connects the two platforms of the train station, and that also connects you to the rail trail. So this more than a future rail station also becomes an important artery for neighborhoods to connect with that rail trail and that waterfront.
Thank you. That's a great point. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with this area, the rail line is actually raised. It's almost somewhat of a levee, and so you have to get up and over it to get to the other side, to the river and the proposed rail trail area. So here are the recommendations. The actions underneath, again, are very similar to Amherst Street, but focusing through the lens of what DW Highway is, and the redevelopment of kind of big box retail at some point in the future. But really to look at the future commuter rail station, how we can create housing directly around this area. There is quite a few. Little known fact, the most dense census tract in New Hampshire, in Nashua, is right here. So there actually is a surprising amount of housing. It's just tucked behind the big box retail that you see along the corridor. So prioritize that infrastructure for the biking, pedestrian, alternative mobility access to the train station and the roadway network. And so think about our future development out of this area. All right, and then I'm going to go back up and then go.
Can I make a comment, or are we going to run out of time?
No, please go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So Matt and I were talking about this on Saturday. You know, if particularly with the train station and this crossing, I love the idea of finding a way to get to the bikes from the community, because people are going to want to do that. You're going to have to figure out how to cross Daniel Webster, which you can't do easily today. And your second point talks about something that would sort of promote. I mean, it's a long shot to sort of encourage this idea of like adjust dimensional regulation to discourage. I don't see it happening, but frankly, you got to figure out a way to get people across the street safely, and it's a challenge. And there's going to be demand if you have, particularly if you have a bike trail. So I just put a pin in that and say, you know, solve the challenge of crossing the highway. That's basically what I wanted to point out.
Thank you, Bill.
And to second on that, or piggyback on that comment, thinking of Four Seasons, some kind of a covered access or bridge to be able to cross the street safely during all seasons.
That's a great point. Thank you.
I like that idea too.
Yeah. We are not known for our winter sidewalks and accessibility. All right, I will move on then. The second goal, it's pausing, is equitable and connected transportation networks. So to ensure access to a range of transportation options to meet the future mobility needs of our residents, workers, and visitors. So our action items here are ensure all public rights-of-way are ADA compliant. I think the city's made some huge strides this way, but we have a lot further to go. And actually, just as a disclaimer with all of these things, many of them the city is making progress on, but we, again, have a lot of progress still to make. And it's really important that we highlight these things as priorities going forward and actions we want to continue to invest in and significantly invest more in. And expand our complete streets policies and initiatives. We have an old recommendation guideline, but we don't have any policy level documents. So really make this a policy level complete streets. Build robust, safe, and connected pedestrian and bicycle networks. Adopt a Vision Zero policy with the goal of reducing traffic injuries and fatalities on Nashua streets. Expand rideshare options. And for those of you who haven't been downtown in 2 weeks, maybe 3, Julie can correct me again. The Bird scooters are back and heavily being used, and everybody's loving them. Expand rideshare options, both through bike share and e-scooters and other rideshare options. And collaborate with our regional partners at transit to improve regional public transportation options.
Sarah, I have a question.
Sure.
You know if Uber and Lyft are going to be starting to do rideshare again as an option where people could get in the same vehicle or going to a place near each other?
That's a great question. I have no idea when they're going to start doing that again. I don't know if it's a national or local call from the Uber or Lyft peeps. It's a good question. We can certainly ask.
Okay. Because I know they had it, at least where I lived, before COVID, but I didn't know what was taking place thereafter.
I don't know if I've never done a ride share around here. I've used Uber around here, but I've never been able to ride share with it. Maybe we just don't have the demand. I'm not sure.
Okay, it's possible.
Yeah.
Just a phrasing, the ride share, to me, an old school transportation guy means carpooling. And I know, so really what you're talking about is bike share, scooter share, and car share, it's essentially the suite of mobility options for essentially not driving yourself. But
I like fleet of mobility options. That
Yeah.
sounds very
Yeah.
20
Sweet,
seconds.
sweet, not fleet, sweet.
Sweet. Yes,
Yeah.
sweet, not fleet. Okay. Thank you. I think I saw Michael Peterson.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a observation. When you were showing the former Dow Chemical site and what may take place there, as far as the Nashua City Planning Board, there have been like 2 topics of discussion. Right now, they want to put a Costco there with a huge parking lot. And on Adventure Way, that little tiny road that goes down alongside CVS, it's already been approved a long time ago that the BJ's is going to put in a gasoline station there. And the proposed Costco is also going to have gasoline stations. So with a huge parking lot, and I'm thinking with that giant parking lot and multiple gas pumps, it's just going to be a big magnet for automobiles. And if it gets utilized, how are all these automobiles going to get in and out? And that's going to put even more pressure on DW Highway of all these automobile drivers going through there. So this whole thing needs to be considered, especially when I hear this group talking about alternative means of transportation and ways to get in and out, when the reality is they're planning cars, and more cars. So that should be taken into account that plans are underway. I mean, the BJ's thing is approved, and the Costco thing is under review and could get approved soon.
Thank you, Mike. So that is shown here as proposed development, and that is, and so those are included in here. But I don't want to talk too much about something that's in front of the planning board right now, because I don't think that's maybe in our best interest, but I think you made a great point. And somebody at another one of these meetings talked about the importance of, as we approve new gas stations, requiring electric vehicle charging stations as well. And I think we'll touch back on this a little bit later tonight, and also in the land use session next week. I'm sorry if this makes people nauseous. It's easier for me to fly around by these cute little things there. Sometimes it's like, oh, you're on an amusement ride. And Betsy.
Yep. Just a quick comment, given that I work for Southern New Hampshire Medical Center, is could we maybe consider adding like safe use of bikes and scooters just for our trauma team? We can't mandate that people wear helmets, but I know our folks would really love that.
Yes. And just to give a little plug is if you sign up for Bird, like you download the app and you actually do a ride, you can put in right from your app. If you pay shipping and handling, which I think is $4.95, it might be $5.95, they'll send you a free helmet.
I believe it's $9.95.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry. Yep, I'm trying to find the link now.
But they will send you a free helmet for a ride, free, just the cost of shipping helmet, so that to try and promote safety. But I think that's a very good point, Betsy. And amazing. The more safety we have, the better off we're going to be.
Going based off what Betsy said, do people get fined if they don't have a helmet? That would be one way to incentivize people to put on their helmets.
So welcome to New Hampshire, Caroline. Caroline was just moved here a little while ago, but we don't have helmet requirements that would allow us to fine people for that.
It's live free or die. That's probably what how the saying goes. Okay.
Yep. Unfortunately.
We do have them on for certain ages. I think it's under 16 requires a bike helmet. And I'm sorry, I don't remember if it's under 16 or 16 and under. But yeah, for adults, nope.
Anyone can get injured. It doesn't matter if you're under 16 or not. But I guess that's when they make you live with the consequence.
I absolutely agree.
Speaking of safety, what is under the Vision Zero policy up above? Did we kind of skip over that? Or I don't know.
Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
So under Vision Zero, to identify the areas where we've had fatal and serious injuries and prioritize those for safety-related improvements. Ensure our municipal fleet is made safer for people who are walking and biking. Outfit municipal trucks with side guards and the collapsible mirrors. and procure fire trucks with shorter wheelbases so they can take tighter radii turns, allowing intersections to kind of slow vehicles because they'd be tighter. I think that one's interesting. All right. I'm going to go back up then and move on to the section just on mobility and transit, if we're good. And again, all of this is on the Imagine Nashua website under draft goals and recommendations. And if you see or hear anything tonight and later you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, I should have said this, or this is important, right here, you can submit your feedback really easily. And so feel free to jump on here anytime or send us an email as well. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place on you guys. So mobility and transit, under land use integration, we want to ensure transportation policy decisions, strategies, and investments are coordinated with land use goals and support our urban environment. Conduct a parking study to reduce use of cars and understand parking versus perceptions of parking. This parking study actually is funded and with COVID has been put off a little bit, but should be underway in not too long, at least in the downtown area. Assess transportation network elements for flood risk and other resilience concerns. I don't remember which ones have something and which don't. Review findings from the CHAP, which is the Community Health Action Plan in relation to heat islands, and determine areas in the city that are most impacted and focus bus shelter improvements in these areas. Integrate resilience into existing asset management and capital planning. Promote neighborhood level planning that encourages alternative modes of transportation. Sally.
Stupid question. What's a heat island?
Oh, it's not a stupid question. That's a good question. A heat island, I'm not going to give you the Google definition, but a heat island is essentially where you have significant amounts of concrete buildings, pavement, tar, and not a lot of things that suck heat, trees, plants, flora, fauna. And so it actually creates a warmer microclimate there, and it keeps the heat in and is hotter than in any other areas of the city. It magnifies the heat because of all that built environment and the lack of tree canopy and green infrastructure around it. Promote neighborhood level planning that encourages alternative modes of transportation, and create development review processes for large real estate development that include mitigation aimed at reducing the number of vehicle trips generated. Slowly move on here. Reliability and efficiency of multimodal operations. Ensure safe and efficient operation of transportation systems with balanced use of street systems for all modes, with really focusing on our pedestrian bicycle networks and hopefully in the future our rail as well. So improve intersection bike safety throughout the city. Betsy.
Hey, also just looking at bikes and thinking about heat and things like that, could there ever be like watering stations in the city where you could actually like fill a water bottle someplace along different bike routes?
It's a great idea. We have some bike repair stations and those are talked about in here. There's no reason we can't have that. Improve wayfinding and increase public awareness of multimodal options. And close critical gaps throughout the city's multimodal networks.
Has anyone ever spoken about a bike share program where people would rent a bike, say take it for 3 or 5 miles and then park it at a station and then someone else would come pick it up and use it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Caroline. So we did have actually a bike share program, and it wasn't station based. It was free roaming in the city. We've been told it isn't economically viable here, but the scooters are. So that's why the scooters were just reintroduced, and the bikes are not back. A couple years ago, before COVID, we had both bikes and scooters in the city. But we do have an amazing resource with the Gate City Co-op. Gate City Bike Co-op. Amber, you can correct me if I'm saying it wrong. And they work really hard to get bikes to people who want and need them and can't afford them in the city too. So we do have a bit of a system that way.
Are they located near a bike trail? So you could go to them, rent a bike, and then bring it back if you just want to ride for fun? No? Okay.
No, not yet, but that's a good idea.
Maybe one day.
And I sit on a board, Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire, and also the Complete Streets Advisory Committee at the state level. And there's been a lot of talk about trying to make bike share more economically viable by pooling as communities and trying to do some kind of regional service and maybe really focus around some of the connected trail systems. So that you'd have, bikes on either end of it that somebody could pick up and take to the other end and bring back. So it is being explored, but it's a tough sell, especially in winter. A lot of the bike share companies want to be in year-round communities or in communities with a really large system of bike lanes and a bike community. And we're working on it. We're building it and we're getting there, but we need a few more attractions for the bike share companies to come back.
Fingers crossed.
Just in general, most of those systems that are quote unquote viable have lots of help, subsidized by the community, have corporate sponsors. So to really build out a network that's going to help people really go from point to point or have enough bikes there that are well maintained, it's very difficult to just expect the customer to, the market to be able to cover it based on user fees. But people really don't want to pay. That's the problem. If you could borrow a bike for an hour and it costs you $15, I mean, you're just not going to do it. That's why it doesn't work. On here.
But the scooters seem to work. I don't know how much they cost, but they seem to work pretty well.
We'll see. Yeah, there's enough people that want to try them. We'll see if it's sustainable.
I think the difference too is that scooters are recreational. They're not really transportation.
Yeah, that's true in our region for sure. And I have access to all the data on the back end, and I won't spend too much time on it because I love this stuff, but I see all the, the times when people are checking per scooter. I know where they are. I know what time they picked it up. I know what time they dropped it off. I know what lat and long they did both on either end. So it's really cool, and we can dive into the numbers and definitely it's recreational, and but that really also helps us identify where we need to start putting some of our investments in our network to make those improvements. We're going to focus on where the people are actually using the devices.
And the difference between these scooters and the bicycles is the scooters require no physical effort, and you can get from place to place quickly, effortlessly. The bicycle requires physical effort, and that's an impediment to people using it.
That's a great point, Mike. Betsy?
I've also wondered about how many adults, especially people who didn't grow up even in the US, even know how to ride a bike. And I don't know that Gate City Co-op actually teaches people. And so I feel like it's sort of the parents' job to kind of teach the kids, but if nobody taught the parents, not sure how we may want to introduce any of that into bike discussions.
Sorry, another plug for the Bike Walk Alliance of New Hampshire. They go into schools and try to work with schools to provide that educational opportunities. There's also things called bike rodeos that they will coordinate and organize, where you set up in a parking lot and you provide helmets. We've had some great assistance through Dartmouth Hitchcock in providing helmets. So there are ways to do it and getting kids interested at that younger age so that they kind of grow up knowing how to ride a bike.
How about their parents?
Yeah, I mean, we try to, you got to get the parents involved too, and to the extent that we can, because we do training for adults too. And actually we do training for drivers to remember how to drive around bicyclists. So we try to cover as many bases as we can.
I mean, I expect that if you build the paths, they will come.
I agree, Peter. Absolutely. I'm trying to find as many grants as I can to make that happen.
I was very pleased this morning. I was on the Riverwalk this morning at 8:30 or 8:15, and the number of people walking downtown and riding bikes and riding those scooters everywhere it was a gorgeous morning, don't get me wrong, but it is awesome. People are using that all the time.
A question. So in tonight's discussion, will we be talking about vehicle charging stations?
I think we're going to talk about those in the land use section. They, like I said, they have been mentioned before. You can certainly talk about them here if you want to talk about vehicle charging. So this is a perfectly reasonable time to do so.
Well,
yeah.
just a quick comment. In previous planning board meetings, the applicant for the Costco project was asked, with all those gas pumps, will there be any vehicle charging stations? And the reply was that a typical shopper doesn't spend enough time in the store for their vehicle to get charged up. So they may make provisions for future wiring, but they have no plans for, actual usable charging stations at the new Costco.
I do know we have a goal here, and
Yeah, I think, Sarah, I wasn't sure if we were going to go through one of the top goals, which was advanced carbon-free transportation in this section. Yeah, wasn't sure if we purposely missed it or.
No. Maybe I was going to do it in land use, but it's fine. I'm more than happy to bring it here since we're talking about it.
I think it's mainly the first action that has all the recommendations.
So advanced carbon-free transportation, encourage accelerated adoption of electric vehicles. There's some great ideas in here, both about level 3, which would be the speedier stations, versus the level 2 charging stations, which we already have quite a few of in the city, but we certainly need a lot more in the network that needs to be built out to support the expansion of our electric vehicles. And so there's a whole section specifically on electric vehicle adoption here. Just leave this up for a second so everybody can look at it. And again, this is under the carbon-free transportation and building design. And we will be talking about it next week too, because this one's largely building. But it's a great point, Mike. It's really important that we highlight that as part of our future land use regulations.
And I think I'll add that what we learned from representatives of Livable Nashua is that a big part of this is education and awareness. So pushing that in the master plan will be a sort of big component.
Yeah.
I also want to add that I know that EV charging stations are sprinkled throughout some of the other goals that are more focused on development as well, not just the one Sarah showed.
So the last one was regional connectivity, enhance the movement of people and goods between Nashua and our greater metropolitan region, encourage increased activity north and south via improved passenger rail connections. So plan proactively around future commuter rail stations, which we've talked a lot about tonight. And actually the state of New Hampshire is working with AECOM to really define that plan for Nashua up to Manchester right now, and are just coming out with some very, very first level recommendations that I saw today. So, well, that is in draft stages, but I think over the next 2 years, as they work on that plan, we should see a lot more refinement of this. And that's why it's so critical for us to talk about it now in the master plan and how much we feel this is an important part of our future. Facilitate connections to neighboring municipalities and beyond for people walking and biking. Work with neighboring municipalities, including those in Massachusetts, to coordinate trails, sidewalk, and bicycle facility projects. And advocate for the transition for the electrification of regional rail. So that's it for tonight. The items we were going to talk about tonight, but
I notice in the regional connectivity, there's not any mention of bus transit.
Oh, that's a great point, John. We'll make sure to add that in. Absolutely.
Because that's been a big emphasis for the state DOT and for NRPC, and there's been a lot of analysis of the viability of some of those projects, and I think it would make sense to tie it in.
I think you're absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, there's a state, NHDOT did a state transit plan not too long ago, if you haven't taken a look at that, and they also did an inventory of park and ride facilities. So yeah, anything that can connect people regionally is should be part of the discussion.
Piggybacking on that, does the anticipated train mean that the express bus to Boston might phase out? Because I really like that.
None of that's been determined yet.
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the study in the next 2 years, but I don't think that one mode will cancel the other out entirely. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked at the Seacoast, right? The Seacoast, the Acela is going through there, and it did not have a major impact on CNJ's ridership. In fact, CNJ expanded service after the train came through.
Yeah, and also when the commuter rail went down to into southeastern Mass from the old colony, everybody thought Plymouth and Brockton bus would go out of business, but people commute differently. They go to they end up both operating. Although I suspect that you can't subsidize both. That's basically the fundamental challenge, and that's one of the biggest things I'm concerned about with commuter rail is the fares are going to be so high that.
Well, we'll hope.
Yeah. No, it's good. I want to see it happen. But.
Well, this is Jay jumping in. I could jump in so many places. I'm holding back, but it's just important to note that the proposed Capital Corridor commuter rail extension would terminate at North Station, and currently Boston Express serves in particular South Station and also Logan Airport, and getting from North Station to Logan Airport is really not realistic on transit. So I think there would still be a market.
You're right.
Excellent point. Thank you, Jay. So as Jay just said, he has so many comments that he's holding back with. I know he's going to put those in writing and get them to us because we value those. And if anybody else has comments that you didn't feel that you could say tonight, or that you haven't thought of yet, or that you wake up in the middle of the night and are like, oh, we would love to hear them. Again, at the top of the website here, there's a really easy Imagine Nashua, draft goals and recommendations. You can submit your feedback here. It's a really simple Google form. You can do it by the top goals, by any section, housing, land use, mobility and transit, and you can write quite a long time in here, and we would really, really appreciate any and all feedback that you have that wasn't submitted so far tonight. And then you just hit the submit button and it's all ready to us. And you can also email us as well. Thank you. Julie just put in the chat, our next last two meetings in this phase are on June 15th, land use and development, and June 21st is housing. What's next, you're asking, after all these fantastic meetings? After we get the heaviest feedback here, UTL is going to, again, do the amazing job of kind of synthesizing everything we have and writing the first draft of the plan. And then we'll be back to you with that, probably not in June, probably later in July anyways. And so the goal is to have a good solid draft of the plan, one more round of feedback, and get it to the Board of Aldermen and the Planning Board for adoption. So that's where we go from here. And thank you all for spending your Thursday evening with us tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Feedback form. Should we submit it after we attend the other two meetings? That way we can have a more thorough analysis of what we want to say.
You can do it any way you want. You can submit right now based on tonight's. You can wait and do it all together at the end. We're open to whatever you think is best.
Okay. You can submit multiple times too, so.
All right, that's good to know. I didn't know if it was just one time per person. Okay.
And you can always email any of us. I think I gave you my card, and if not, we've got the imagine.nashuanh.gov website that has multiple ways of reaching out.
And the survey is anonymous, but if you feel like leaving your name, please do.
Sounds
Also, for people who had feedback on the Nashua transit system, for what it's worth, there's opportunities to improve that system, you know, before this master plan process is completed. And, you know, Nashua Transit welcomes feedback, and we have meetings every other month for the public to participate in. It's Transit Matters. And so, you know, if you felt strongly like Sunday service or expanded evening service, those are things that, you know, don't have to wait for this master plan process to get traction.
Thank you, John. That's a great point. Transit Matters was yesterday? So
It
there'll be
was,
one
so
in
it's not for another 2 months, but
2 months, but still keep an eye out for it. Yeah.
yep.
Is there a mailing list I can get onto for Master Transit?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, ridebigblue.com, you can sign up for Civic Engage, which would send you all of our alerts and notifications. And that's our primary way for communicating. We also use Facebook pretty extensively. So it's another following Nashua Transit System on Facebook is a great way to hear what we've got going on.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so
Bye.
much.
Thank you.